Six Nations 2025, folks. We are 3 rounds into the competition. We're on a fallow week at the moment, but the Six Nations has been on my brain. I've been having a look at some of the stats and having a look at some of the areas where it feels like there might be new trends emerging, there might be some problems that need fixing, or just some general changes from the way the teams have played in the past. We'll go through each of the 6 teams, some of the things that I've spotted in the numbers, and you guys can let us know your thoughts. But we do need to keep in mind we are merely 3 games into the season. So this is nothing in terms of trying to build a trend. One game can certainly throw out an average if something kind of drastic like a 70-plus scoreline comes along. So yes, that is a factor. We are playing with different laws from last year, so that is going to affect the stats. The oppositions are different, the players are different, the weather conditions are different. So all of these things are different, but what can I say? I like to have a look at the numbers just to see what is going on. I want to start with the Irish because of their possession numbers. All throughout last year, not just the Six Nations, but across their entire 2024 season, one of the trends that I felt was apparent was Ireland do better when they have more ball. They are a possession-hungry team who like to cycle through phases. They like to grind teams down. They exhaust them. They are unstoppable at times with that kind of high ruck speed. That involves having heaps of possession. And in the games where Ireland didn't do that well, it tended to be in the games where they didn't have as much ball as they would have liked. However, they seem to be bucking that trend so far this season because in 2 of the 3 games Ireland have played, they've had less than half the ball against Wales and against Scotland. And they only had, I think, slightly over half the ball in their opener against England. And yet they still look very comfortable. I don't want to say it's a massive shift, but it's an encouraging shift that there's not necessarily a one-to-one correlation between keep the ball out of Ireland's hands and you're going to beat them, because nope, Ireland looking quite comfortable under Simon needs to be right now to play without the ball. Like we've seen that from France in the past. But Ireland right now looking really comfortable, averaging, 46% possession across the first 3 games. I think last year at this time last year across the Six Nations it was 56% possession. So again, small sample size, but I think an encouraging sign. And also they've been kicking a wee bit more, despite having less ball. Might be just they're playing with a different 10. Sam Prendergast has got a hell of a boot on him in terms of his kicking from hand. And James Lowe's got a big old boot. James Gibson Park, his boot's been accurate. So making the most of that trio of guys in terms of pushing other teams back into their own territory. So that's just a wee snippet into Ireland. For France, the handling has been under the spotlight. Fabien Galtier swung the axe a little bit. The likes of Pinot and Jalibert being dropped after that loss to England. And admittedly, the handling has been poor. It was better in their most recent game, where they put the Italians to the sword, but still averaging 12 knock-ons a game. It was 7 across the Six Nations last year. So, yeah, I don't know how you necessarily coach better handling into players, but certainly the handling in the first 2 games didn't look fantastic, and that is reflected in the numbers. But as I said, they certainly showed that they can chuck the ball around and catch it when they played the Italians in Rome. And interestingly, their possession numbers have also crept up a wee bit. France have, under Galtier, often been a team which plays with less than half the ball, and sometimes around about half, whereas they've pushed the numbers up a little bit from last year. 54% becoming a slightly more possession-dominant team compared to around 50% in the Six Nations last year. For England, does it feel like they are kicking the ball even more? If yes, that is reflected in the numbers. England have actually had slightly less possession than they did in the Six Nations last year, and yet they are kicking an average of 40 times a game. It was 30 times in the Six Nations last year. England under Borthwick have, I think, traditionally been the number 1 kicking side in World Rugby. They put boot to ball more than anybody else, but he's pushing that to the next level. He's kind of min-maxing those numbers. Let's put more of those stats into the kicking game. They are still very much in the Six Nations race, so it seems to be working for now. One might argue that they have been a little bit fortuitous that the The French didn't handle the ball particularly well at Twickenham, and the Scots had a particularly bad day with the boot when they played them. But hey, I don't mean to take anything away from them. 2 from 3 means they are still very much in the Six Nations race. One stat that's a little bit concerning is the opposition line breaks. They've been averaging 9 opposition line breaks conceded in their first 3 of the Six Nations this year, which is almost double last year's numbers. So defensive line is just looking a little bit easier to penetrate, but then I think the attacking numbers are generally a bit up. So again, that could be one that links with some of the law changes that we've seen. For the Scots, the goal kicking last year was pretty immaculate. I think it was like 96% or something crazy across the Six Nations. This year, they've had a 60% outing, a 75% outing, and a 0% outing. So, yeah, the goal kickings for the Scots is just... that's just one of those ones. Sometimes you don't get them. You'd like to have those numbers up a bit higher, but it's not like Scotland are just naturally a terrible goal kicking team. It's just the Six Nations hasn't gone that particularly well. One thing that's positive, though, for the Scots is the attacking numbers have actually looked even better. Like, Scotland looked dangerous, and the numbers are reflected in that. They've always looked dangerous even last year as well. They were averaging over 4 clean breaks a game. This year they're closer to 7. But again, the attacking numbers are up generally across the board, but you still feel like Scotland under Townsend are able to get guys into space. For the Italians, I mean, the easy one would be to just go for, wow, conceded a lot of tries against France. You've conceded more tries in your first 3 games this year than in all 5 games last year. There are 18 tries conceded compared to the 16 they conceded across the entire tournament last year, and we are still 2 rounds to play. But the Italian result against the French obviously throws those numbers totally out of whack. But interestingly, the Italians have been mauling it a bit more. Last year, in the Six Nations, they hardly mauled it at all. Less than 2 mauls a game. We're seeing 4 or more from the Italians this year in the Six Nations. They've had the lightest pack in Tier 1 teams for a wee while, so you can kind of see why they wouldn't necessarily go for the maul. But they are adding a little bit of that to their game, which I think is promising, because if you got a maul threat, then teams actually have to set for the maul sometimes. They can't just know that you're going to spin it wide. For the Welsh, I didn't look at their numbers from last year to this year. It's an even smaller sample. I just looked at the first 2 games in the Six Nations compared to the most recent one with the coaching change. Defenders beaten was more in that last game against Ireland than in the first 2 games combined. Obviously, the Italian game had horrendous weather conditions and whatnot, but still, I wouldn't have picked it that Wales would break 33 Irish tackles compared to a combined 32 with Italy and France combined. So that's an encouraging sign for one game. And they conceded 2 clean breaks against the Irish, whereas they conceded 9 in their first 2 games. Admittedly, 8 of them against France, where they got hammered 43-0. But still, there are some from one game encouraging signs for the Welsh. We will see how they go for the remaining 2 rounds. You guys let us know your thoughts. What other things have your kind of gut been telling you that are maybe reflected in the stats? These ones are all the Opta stats, which I've got to be getting them from ESPN, but you can get them from a few different sources. I try not to use the Six Nations stats too much because they measure run meters in a different way. Opta only gives you run meters when you go forward. Some of the other websites give you run meters for going sideways or backwards. So not quite as indicative from what I'm used to anyway. I'm used to the Opta stats. But you guys let us know your thoughts. Subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed some stats. Take care of yourselves, and I'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.